we are officially open after 2 pretty incredible fireside chats, the official opening from our global partners. We are ready to rock and roll. Just to remind you today, there's so much content going on, and right across the way, the industry and energy track is kicking off. Down in the next room, we have the health and education happening on tomorrow, and then we have fashion as well tomorrow and later on today. So be sure to get out and around and see everything that's going on. Back over this way of the innovation stage as well, which is pretty exciting all morning. And we have the next big thing out in the marketplace. And all of that is without forgetting that the marketplace is full of our 100 finalists. Our 100 startups have competed to be here at South Summit with more than 3,000 applications this year. And we're thrilled to have them with us. We think they're really, really promising companies. And you can visit them all out in the marketplace. And they're also going to be pitching throughout the day on the various sandbox, playbox, and innovation stages also. So moving along with the program, we are thrilled to announce our first keynote speaker this morning. This guy is an incredibly experienced entrepreneur, a very wide and varied and fascinating career, and with one of the most well-known companies he has founded is Square, which has revolutionized the world of payments. He is a serial entrepreneur, a serial investor, mentors and supports numerous startup companies around the world, particularly in Silicon Valley, has a really broad and unique view of the world in many different industries, and is extremely experienced. So we are absolutely thrilled to have with us today Jim McKelvey, one of the co-founders of Square, who's going to share his experience with you today. Thanks a million. Thanks. Great to have you here. The floor is yours.
Clicker. Clicker? This is part of the South Summit hazing, I'm absolutely sure. Well, thank you for inviting me here today. While they find the clicker, which is here. All right. So thanks for the invitation. I've got a little confession to make, and that is I love public speaking. I really enjoy this. And it gets me out, it gets me to travel all over the world, and I play a little game on the organizers. When I accept a speaking invitation, I never tell them the topic that I'm going to speak on. And as a matter of fact, any topic they want to assign me, I always say yes. So the topic that they gave me today was reinventing an industry, and they told me this was going to be what I had to talk to you about. Tell the audience how to reinvent an entire industry. Oh, and by the way, you have 25 minutes. And I was in a panic because this is a big topic. You know, if you're going to reimagine, reinvent, change an entire industry, that's a big speech, folks. And so I started writing out my speech, and after it got past about 100 slides, I realized there was no way I was going to be able to get this in 25 minutes. But I'd said yes to this topic, and so I had to come up with something. And so I looked through my speech, and I was looking through all these things that I was going to say, and most of the stuff that I was going to say, you already know. Most of the stuff I was going to say was pretty obvious. It was at least obvious enough that I didn't feel comfortable not cutting it out. But there were 5 things that were left after I disposed of almost all of my slides that I thought were so counterintuitive, so backwards, so crazy to me that if I told you those, maybe you could infer the rest of the speech around it. So today, what I'm going to do is I'm going to tell you these 5 crazy things that seem obvious to me, but in fact, it turns out are not. And let's just go through them. If you're reinventing an industry, what are the things you need to do? First, seek opportunities, right? I mean, that's what entrepreneurs do. We look around, we see the world, we see opportunities, and we gather resources and marshal those resources towards those opportunities. That just makes sense. That's what an entrepreneur does. And it's good if the entrepreneur can invent something new, right? That's good. You invent something new, you patent it. I have 60 patents. 1 in art, 59 in payments. Inventing. If you invent something, you can protect it. It gives you a competitive advantage against other companies. So we're always looking for an advantage through an invention. And then the third thing that everybody agrees on, especially in Silicon Valley, we have this expression called Silicon Valley time. So Square, the company that I started, it's a really good place to work. As a matter of fact, if some of you guys want to work there, let me talk to you after the speech. But one of the great things about Square is our offices. We spent over $60 million redecorating the office. We didn't buy the building, we just made it really nice. And one of the things we did was we built this fantastic kitchen. One of the floors of this incredible building in downtown San Francisco is nothing but food. And we serve the most amazing meals, breakfast, lunch, and dinner. And you know why we do that? Because if you work at Square, we kind of expect you to be at the office for breakfast, lunch, and dinner. We work at this incredible pace. We work this thing called internet time, and we work really fast. And if you're going to reinvent an industry, it's also good to study great leaders, to learn from the people who've gone before, to come to conferences, to hear the best and brightest minds share their insights with you, so we can learn from people and then maybe not feel so alone. And then the final thing is we need to be bold. Because it's scary, right? You're doing something different. You're inventing something new. It hasn't been done before. So you have to have the guts, the strength to go out and do something new. So these are the 5 things that I'm here to tell you are absolutely wrong. I don't believe them anymore. Let's start with the big one. Seeking opportunities. So this is interesting. I've started companies in 5 different industries. And the only company that failed was one where I was seeking a real opportunity. I saw this fantastic opportunity, hired all these guys, went after it, got killed. And I think it's because of the nature of opportunity. Opportunity is vague. It's hard to determine if something is truly an opportunity or not. But it's really easy to see a problem. And so today, what I'm going to talk to you about, as an example, are 2 problems, actually, that found the basis for Square. And the first was a personal problem that I had. And I don't like to admit this publicly, but I was actually, for a while, a professional artist. I still have a largely black wardrobe, and I have a very specific definition of what it means to be an artist. An artist is a person who sells something that nobody needs. And a perfect example of this is this crazy thing that I made a couple of years ago. This is a glass bathroom faucet. I was kind of bored with the faucets in my bathroom, so I said, oh, I'll make a new one out of glass. It took me 100 tries to make this thing. It's just a spout for water, okay? And then people wanted to buy them. And I hate making these things because it took me dozens of tries to make a single one. So I also have this belief that I should never say no. I don't ever say no, except with my price. So what I did with these faucets, because I hated making them, was I kept raising the price and raising the price. And finally, I raised the price so high that I loved making these faucets. And so one day, a lady came in to buy a faucet, and she only had an American Express card, which I couldn't take. And so I lost the sale because I couldn't take the form of payment. And I had one of these devices in my hands. I had an iPhone. And I looked at this device and I was like, how come this device couldn't take this payment? And that was the idea that led to Square. Simple problem that I had. But Square's been very successful, and I don't think it was for that reason. I think it was because of another problem that I had. Actually, it wasn't my problem, it was a problem one of my friends had. His name is Bob. Now, normally I would show you a photo of Bob, but I'm going to show you a photo of Bob's car, because the car tells you a lot about the man. Bob's car is a 1992 Chevy Corsica. I don't think they allow these on the streets in Europe, but This is actually not Bob's Corsica, because if it was Bob's Corsica, there would be a special aftermarket item. There would be a yellow bungee cord that sort of hooks into the wheel well and covers the hood. And the bungee cord is important because the Chevy Corsica is such a piece of crap that the latch that keeps the hood closed rusts after about 5 years of driving around on American roads where we salt the roads, and it rusts out. And then if you don't have a bungee cord, terrible things happen. And one day, actually it was one night, it was a night, and it was raining. Bob was crossing the Mississippi River driving into the studio to do some work, and the bungee cord let go. And the wind caught under the hood, and it flipped it up over the windshield, totally obliterating the road. Most people at this point would pull over. This is not what my friend Bob did. He leans out the window, kind of like a dog does, right? And he's trying to drive like this, but it's raining. So he's getting hit in the face with rain. So this is not working. At this point, most people would pull over. Bob does not. Bob drives 17 miles at night in the rain, looking out the gap between the top of his hood. You can see the hood folded over the windshield and the bottom of the dashboard. Here's the bungee cord, and there is actually my buddy Bob. Now, what do we know about Bob? He's a little crazy, okay? But at the very least, you could say this is not a guy who gives up easily, right? When the road disappears from view, Bob does not pull over. He's not a quitter. You would think he'd be pretty successful, especially if you knew the other piece of data that I know, which is that Bob is an excellent glassblower. He's a better glassblower than I am. He's stronger, he's more dexterous, he can handle more glass, and he's a better designer. He's just flat out better. And I used to make a very good living as a glass artist. But the other reason I show you Bob's 1992 Chevy Corsica is that from time to time, when things were rough, Bob has had to live in the back of this car. And that always bothered me. I never understood why my friend couldn't make a living, even though he was such a good glassblower. But it turns out, in the United States, if you have a bad credit rating, you can't take credit cards. If you have a certain background, they won't even let you bank. And my friend Bob was excluded from the rails of commerce. And it always bothered me. So when Jack and I started Square, the image that I kept in my head and actually pinned on my desk was this picture of my friend Bob. Could we build a system that would solve his problem? Could we make a payment system that was so inclusive for everybody that even a guy like Bob could participate? We weren't looking for an opportunity. We were solving a problem. So let's talk about invention. Everyone's talking about inventing. I've got all these patents. What do I think about inventing? Well, what I really think about inventing is that you shouldn't do it. Invention is a last resort. And my best illustration for this is my father. Now, Dad just turned 90, and I gave him one of these devices. You probably recognize it. It's an iPad. It was his birthday present. Now, when you give a 90-year-old man a piece of technology, it comes with another gift too, doesn't it? It comes with a lesson. Right? You got to teach him how to use the thing, right? So that's what I did. I'm sitting down with my dad. I'm showing him how to install Wi-Fi. I'm showing him how to pick up his email. I'm showing him how to use the various apps. And he's asking me all these questions about, what does this do? What does this do? How does this device work? And I said, that's not the way to think about the iPad. That's not the way to view this device. This device does anything you want. Anything you can imagine, this thing should do. Right? So right now it's a timer so I don't talk too long, okay? But if I wanted to, it becomes a TV, or it becomes a phone, or it becomes a game, or it becomes a stock market ticker, or it becomes a payment system. This device turns magically into anything I want, right? So the way I taught my 90-year-old father how to use his iPad was I said, it's magic. It does anything you want. You want to talk to your son, you want to see your grandson right now, have a video chat with your grandson, it does that. And if you can find something that this device doesn't do, call me, we'll start another billion-dollar company. That's my attitude towards technology. Technology does whatever we want it to do, invent as a last resort. But what about this internet speed? I mean, you can hear I talk pretty fast, right? I'm a fast talker. I got 12 minutes left. We got to work at internet speed here. What's my attitude towards speed? I don't believe in it anymore. And I'm going to tell you an interesting story from the glass world. So I love blowing glass, and there are a bunch of cool things about glass blowing, but there's something that's unique about glass blowing as an industry, and that is everyone agrees that there's one guy who's the best in the world. He's this old Italian man. His name is Lino Tagliapietra. And Lino is the best in the world. And I don't know of any other industry where there is universal consensus on who the best person is, right? Who's the best football player? You're going to fight in Spain about that conversation. But, like, who's the best accountant? Who's the best programmer? Who's the best entrepreneur? There are many entries. But in the glass-blowing world, we all agree there's this one guy, he's the best. And I got to take a class from him. I had been blowing glass for 15 years at the time when I got into this class. And his class is pretty special. He takes 10 students, you study with him for 2 weeks, and you are allowed to ask one question. Solamente una pregunta. One question. And the question is a big deal. And students become obsessed with this question. And what they do is they spend literally weeks trying to formulate the perfect question for the master. And the questions always take the same form. They ask him to do something impossible with glass. And he is literally the best glassblower in the world, so he does it. And these demonstrations are amazing. But when I asked my question to Lino, none of the other students even paid attention because I asked such a basic question they thought they already knew. I asked the world's greatest glassblower how to put a foot on a bowl. Now, for those of you who are not glassblowers, let me explain this. This is pretty basic stuff. We teach this in the first week of a beginner class. You basically take a bowl here, which is this sort of large orange glob on the bottom, and you stick another piece of glass, that hot sort of yellow thing on top is a foot. And you do this, and I had been blowing glass for 15 years, and I had done this thousands of times, but I had never been comfortable with it. Sometimes I'd do it and it would work. Sometimes I'd do it and it wouldn't work. And it would always bother me, and I'd always get just uptight when I was about to do this move, and I could never really master it. I studied with different people, different techniques, and I only had one question. And I didn't want to waste it, but I had to know. So I asked Lino how to do this very basic thing. And I expected his answer to be like the other answers he gave to the other students. I expected him to show me how to do it. It's not what he did. He said, well, he said this in Italian, but he said, go make a bowl. So I made a bowl. He says, okay, make a foot. I made a foot. He says, okay, put the foot on the bowl. I was like, okay. And I was starting to do that, and as I was putting the hot glass on the cold glass, he put his hand on my shoulder. He said, wait, now. And when he said now, I let the hot glass fall, and it went on perfectly. And this blew my mind because I'd been doing it right for 15 years. But I'd been doing it at the wrong time. And in glass, timing is everything, because if you make a shape out of hot glass, but the glass is too hot, it will not retain that shape. It just oozes out. But if you make the move too late, the glass is too cold and you can't make the shape in the first place. And I saw this mistake illustrated for me in the studio, and all of a sudden, everywhere else in my life, I saw I was making the same mistake, right? Like, how many times was I doing the right thing, but at the wrong moment? There is a time to do it. There is a time to do it, and it is not always now. It is not always as soon as possible. Who was the first social network? Friendster. Who was the second social network? MySpace. Who was the successful social network? Facebook. You can be too early. Be aware of time. And how do we learn all this stuff? Who are the people who can teach us these things? Well, I think probably the best person, if I had to nominate one person who is probably the greatest authority on business, it would be this man. Do you recognize this? So yes, yeah. That's Jack Welch. Jack Welch. Jack Welch is the biggest badass in business. Jack Welch, he's nicknamed after a nuclear weapon. Neutron Jack, that's his name. How cool cool do you have to be nicknamed after a nuclear weapon? He turned around General Electric. General Electric, they make power plants, locomotives. They made the airplane engines that flew me here this week. He turns this company into the greatest powerhouse. And he was manager of the century. It was last century, but he was the manager of the century. And I got to meet him under the most horrible circumstances. It was terrible. I had to give a speech in Copenhagen, and they put me on after Jack Welch. And I looked at the organizers, and I said, no, wait, you can't do this. Like, you don't follow the Rolling Stones on stage. You know, he drops the mic, that's it, everyone goes to the bar, right? I don't follow Jack Welch. Jack Welch is the headliner. And they said, no, we've printed up the program. You got to follow Jack Welch. And I'm terrified. And I'm sitting literally in those two seats watching Jack. Now, Jack's in his 80s. And I'm sitting there going, okay, maybe he'll suck, right? Maybe he's old. And they put these two chairs on the stage, and he needs kind of help getting on the stage. I was like, oh, thank God, Jack's lost it. And he sits down, and he's awesome. He kills it. He's funny. He's giving great advice. He's the best guy ever. And I'm terrified. And I'm sitting there talking to the guy next to me. And you know how, like, when you're really scared, you just talk to a stranger? It's exactly what I did. Grabbed this guy's arm. And I was like, I can't follow Jack Welch. I can't go on after this. I don't know what I'm going to do. And he says to me, oh, yes, Jack. We love Jack in Copenhagen. We've all read his books. We've all tried his policies. None of it works. I said, what? He says, it doesn't work. It doesn't work in Copenhagen. It worked for GE, but it doesn't work. Rank and yank. Nah, we're more socialist. Even the manager of the century was only good in a particular context. I started a very successful company, but I started my company in 2009. Guess what, folks? It's not 2009 anymore. And the people who give you advice from stage, we may think we're giving good advice, but it's good advice within the context of our perspective. And by the way, it's also hard to tell if you're lucky. I've done a lot of stuff. Some of the stuff has been successful. Was it because I was really smart or really lucky? There's no way to tell. So even advice from the best people is advice you can feel safe to ignore. So what about being bold? What about taking risks? Isn't this what entrepreneurs do? And I've thought about this because I've started a lot of companies, and most of them have worked. And I was trying to think in the context of reinventing an industry, what it felt like. Because if you're going to reinvent an industry, if you're going to do something, you're going to be under a lot of stress. It's not always going to work very well. And I was trying to think of a way to convey boldness, the attitude. How do you muster the ego to do something like this? And then I realized that, in fact, this was not actually my experience. And I came up with an analogy that I hope you'll tolerate here because it involves snow, and I know you don't get that much snow in Madrid. But back when I was a student, I took a ski trip. And I took a ski trip to a place in Colorado. My friends had a condo. They had their parents' condo, and they said, Jim, if you can rent a car, you can come out and ski for free, stay in the condo. It would be awesome. So I rented a car. I rented this little white Toyota Tercel, and I started driving. And I'm driving down the road, and over the course of about half an hour, my view of the road changed from this to that. I was caught in a blizzard, and they shut the road. Of course, I was already on the road, so I kind of had to keep going, except that I couldn't see the road. And this was terrifying, because I'm not a guy like my friend Bob. I'm a guy who pulls over. But I'm also a guy who's had a lot of math. I've been trained as an engineer, got a degree in math. I have a second degree in economics. I'm sometimes incapable of stopping myself from doing math. And I'm doing the following math in my head. I'm in a 2,200-pound white Toyota Tercel. Somewhere behind me is a 16,000-pound plow truck driven by a guy who's been awake for a day and a half. I would love to pull over to the side of the road, but I don't really know where the side of the road is. So I've got to continue, but I can't see the road. As a matter of fact, the only thing I can see, and I don't even know if you can see it in this picture, is this little reflector. In the United States, every mile, they stick a pole with a reflector on it. I didn't know this, but it was the only thing visible. It was the only thing that stuck out of the snow. And so I would drive trying to find the next reflector. But the problem was they spaced these things out every mile, and I couldn't see for a mile. I could only see for about maybe a quarter of a mile. So most of the time I was blind, guessing where the road was. And sometimes, by the way, I would guess wrong. Sometimes I would be way off on the side, one way or the other, and I'd only get these occasional signposts telling me that I was doing right. All of the time, in my head, thinking about that plow truck that I can't see, that I know is back there, going to kill me. And I drove on. Not because I was bold, but because I was scared. And that, frankly, this is a terrible way to end the talk, but that's what it feels like. You're going to reinvent an industry. If you are going to do something truly different, you are not going to have signposts. You are not going to have any positive confirmation, at least consistent positive confirmation, that what you are doing is working. There will be no signs, there will be no guide, and you will probably, if you are like me, be driven more by fear than by a bold sense of adventure. But there's some good news. I was not killed. I actually made it to the ski hill, and guess what? Nobody else did. We had the place to ourselves. It was fantastic. And I got to stay in my friend's condo, and neither me nor, I'm happy to say these days, my friend Bob had to sleep in our cars. Thank you very much.
Fantastic. Excellent. Thank you so much. Excellent. Really appreciate it.